Welcome to the Legal CFO.
Welcome to the show where clarity meets profitability. This is the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler, the founder of Netprofit CFO. If you're a law firm owner looking to get a handle on your finances, grow your bottom line, and finally take control of your numbers, you're in the right place. Each episode, Ryan breaks down the business side of law with straightforward strategies to help your firm run smarter, earn more, and scale with confidence. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about the early financial warning signs that often show up long before a law firm realizes it's in trouble. Welcome, Ryan. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yes, absolutely. Excited to be here and excited to dive in today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Ryan, from your perspective, with all your years of experience, what are some of the earliest financial warning signs that something isn't working, even if the firm still looks successful on the surface?
For sure. I think it starts with little things, right? It's when the little things cause big problems. Like as an example, maybe one of your bigger clients at the firm pays a little bit late, right? Maybe by a week, maybe by 2 weeks, and that starts to stress you, right? Or it's just when the little things don't fall into place perfectly, and all of a sudden, you kind of see your bank balance dip for a while, and maybe you have some bills coming up like payroll and things. Those early warning signs, again, it's just in the little things that sometimes get missed, but can be early warning signs that, hey, something's off here, right?
And you don't pay attention sometimes, those little things, right? Why do many law firm owners miss these red flags when they first appear? Is it because they're so small, or are there other factors at play?
Yeah, I think other factors at play, there's so many different numbers and metrics and things that we could be watching, right? If you asked me to, I could probably list out well over 50 KPIs, right? That a law firm could watch. But if you're watching that many, are we really taking action based on the numbers, right? And based on what they do? And my answer to that would be no, right? It's too many to watch, too many things to see. And so unfortunately, sometimes the little things like I said, maybe a client pays late and it stresses you, or maybe an attorney isn't keeping up fully with their billings where they should be for a month or two. Sometimes those kind of things just fall beneath the cracks because you're a business owner, you're wearing a lot of hats, there's a lot of other things going on. And I would say it is impossible to track all of the important numbers. Maybe there's somebody out there doing it that could make a liar out of me, but I kind of doubt it. There's just so many things you could be tracking and looking at. How do you know which ones are the most important?
I think it comes down to habits, don't you? How do those small, repeated financial decisions, those habits that we create, compound into a much bigger problem if they go unchecked?
Yes. And it also depends on, where you're going this year with your firm, what your plan is, right? Because sometimes you can have habits that make you successful at the level that you're at. But when you try to grow to that next stage, maybe you're $1 million firm and you're trying to go to 3 million, those habits that you have at a $1 million firm might not work in the same way at a $3 million firm. And so sometimes it's also not adapting those habits as you grow the business and things change.
What patterns tend to show up around cash handling, billing habits, or decision making that signal deeper issues ahead?
Yes. Number one thing that I look for is consistency, I would say, right? Especially when we think about our billing. Are we getting bills out consistently? That can be a real challenge for founders, especially dependent upon how much reviewing you've got to do, right? I think every law firm probably has some newer attorneys on staff that it's inevitable you're going to write off some time. That's just kind of how the business of law works. But are we getting that done in an efficient way? And are we able to get our bills out on a regular time schedule, right? And the most important thing is it's not inconsistent. It's not, well, in the month of January, I got our bills out on the 6th. But then in the month of February, I was in a trial and had a lot of things on my plate, and I didn't get our bills out to the 18th, right? Just that inconsistency, not only, earlier I mentioned maybe a client pays 10 days late. What if you get your bills out 10 days late, right? What if something, crazy happens? I had a partner just 2 months ago was is in a basketball intramural league and tore his Achilles. Unfortunately, like really really bad injury, right, for basketball, and it definitely happens. But then all of a sudden he can't come into the office for 4 weeks, right? That he is like at home, has to be leg elevated, all that kind of stuff, and just wasn't conducive for him to get to the office. And so, are your bills still going out when those kind of things happen, right? It's kind of your hit by a bus scenario, but it can really happen, right? That's real life. So, yeah, just those consistencies, habits, you know, are we hitting the mark and hitting our target goal for when we want to get our bills out by and when we want to get things done by?
Ryan, you talked about physical stress, but how does stress around money often show up in a firm before the numbers clearly represent the problem? You're working one to one with these lawyers. I'm sure you have a sense of some of them are stressed about that billing and getting the money out there and doing all of the accounting that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you can get your business in a cycle and have the right patterns and the right habits and have enough cash sitting in the bank that you're not worried about it. I call it, you're able to sleep well at night, right? Completely night and day, right? I mean, if you're a solo owner, you really set the tone at the organization, right? And culturally, how you show up every day makes a big difference. And so I love to get my owners to a place where we have 2 or 3 months of expenses in the bank, and usually that's a big enough bank balance where we don't even have to think about it, right? That even if sales stop tomorrow, which that's an extreme scenario, like a COVID scenario, right? Even if sales stop tomorrow, if we can pay our bills, then that includes payroll, paying our people for 2 to 3 months. That gives us some runway to pivot, make changes if we need to, right? Um, way less stressful, right? And if you're an owner out there listening, I mean, just a quick exercise, right? Take your last bank statement that maybe you get it delivered electronically, maybe you still get it in the mail, and just look at from your operating account, what was the expense number that went out? Maybe it's $30,000, maybe it's 50, right? And then just imagine you have 3 times that in your bank account, right? So if you're $50,000 a month in expenses, you have $150,000 sitting in your bank account. Probably makes you feel a whole lot different than if you had 5,000, right? So even just thinking about those numbers, $50,000 in expenses, how does 150,000 make you feel on the inside compared to 5,000, right? Even if those aren't your numbers, we all can imagine that scenario, right? And the extreme ends of that make us feel different inside for sure, right? And how would you show up to work differently every day if there was 150 there versus 5, right? So those kinds of things, when I get on meetings with owners, and a lot of times even in the sales process, they'll come to me and they're having some challenges and they're stressed for cash flow. Normally I pick it up pretty quickly. I mean, it's evident. The stress is there. It's evident.
And in firms that eventually face serious financial trouble, what warning signs do you often realize were present months, maybe even years before?
So a big one is looking at profitability and cash flow, right? At the end of the month, are we more money in the bank than what we had the prior month, right? And we've really got to account for all the transactions that are happening, you know, especially when it comes to like annual bills, right? Most law firms probably pay their malpractice insurance annually. So that's an expense you're going to have one month. Let's just say you have it in January. If we're looking at June's activity, we might be cash flow ahead, but are we far enough ahead that we're banking money for that annual bill that's coming next January, right? Another good example would be research contracts, right? Or, your Westlaw or Thomson Reuters or something like that, right? Typically gets paid on an annual bill basis as well. Are we setting aside money to be able to pay that annual bill? Because that's another time when firms can really get squeezed for cash flow, is when those annual bills come up. And so, the warning signs that I look for months and years in advance are, I look back at our history and let's look at how much money are we really adding to the bank? And if we're not adding money to the bank, what is it going to take us to get there? Where everything's paid, the owner's paid, all the people are paid, all of our debts are paid, and the business is producing cash, right? Because if we're not in that place, you're really on a road headed towards being out of business. It might happen really slowly, right? Like maybe, you have the capability to go out and get a loan, right? And maybe you have a line of credit or something like that, and maybe you have a good amount of money in the bank, right? You could have $100,000 in the bank, and let's say you're bleeding or losing $1,000 a month. Well, you have 100 months, right? Well, that is well over 7 years. So it could be really slowly, right? That you could still be in business for the next 7 years. But if that's not a pattern that we change, you will go out of business eventually, right? And so, and then for some firms, that they're in much more dire situations, right? Have 100, maybe are bleeding 20 or 30, the timeline is much shorter. So there are those warning signs, and that's what I like to look at. I like to go look at the last few months, see what we've done. Are we cash positive? Are we cash negative? And what are the numbers that are really going to help us turn this around, right? If we are cash negative, why? And what's going to help us turn us around?
And we've all seen it happen. Uh, it makes me wonder if you have a real life example. We're talking hypothetical, but do you have an example of a firm that you worked with where early red flags were ignored, and what were some of the issues that they had to address, that they were forced to address in time?
Yeah, so I don't have one where they were ignored, but I do have a firm. They came to me. They had a really, really good year 2 years ago. And the most recent year was a worse year. It was a bad year, and they were actually cash flow negative. And they caught some of these signs, and they're like, "Hey, this year really wasn't as good as the year prior, right?" And so they came to me, and we started working together. And again, so two years prior to me working with them, they had a positive cash flow year, and they added a strong 5 figures to the bank. I believe it was in the $70,000 or $80,000 range that they had added to the bank balance. That was positive cash that was sitting there, and that was great. And the next year, they were down 6 figures, so it really hurt. There were several factors going on that caused that, but they definitely didn't ignore it. And I think that's really the important thing, is that they didn't ignore it. They were able to recognize it. Obviously, when you have a swing like that, of 6 figures, it's easier to see, right? And it hurts. But we were able to make changes and really get them turned around, right? And the first year went from a negative 6 figures to getting back into the positives, right? And it wasn't a 70 or 80,000. I think the first year it was about 20 or 30, somewhere in there. Next year after that really took off and was a 6 figure positive. So, again, the biggest thing is you've got to have time. You've got to have time to be able to make changes. If you don't, that's when the time clock can run out on you. So yeah, that's the closest story that I have. Luckily, like I said, they were watching their numbers, watching a few things, and really wanted to make an effort to dive in and figure out what's going on here and how can we fix it. And took my help, and we fixed it.
keeping track of all of those numbers, expenses, income, all of the things matters. But how can a firm owner really tell the difference between a temporary rough patch and a structural financial problem within their company?
Yes, great question. I like to look at our circumstances. A lot of times with personnel to start out with, again, vacations or time out of the office. Again, like I'll go back to, I have a partner that is out for 4 weeks, right? With torn Achilles, right? Is that going to create a rough patch? I mean, if you're a listener out there, take your billings out of your firm as a partner. And what does that do to your financials, right? So I really like to look at personnel first. Do we have things that are anomalies that are not normal? Have we made hires recently that maybe they are not fully efficient yet? They're not fully up to speed and getting us a return that we expect. And then beyond that, I like to just look at, variances in our expenses. What has changed? Did we move office space? Maybe that's another one, right? Where our rent changed, we moved, or maybe we stayed in the same building, but our rent changed, right? If we have several factors going on at once, where maybe we hired an employee and our rent changed, and maybe a partner was out on vacation, so we're missing their billings, right? Yeah, the numbers are going to look rough. Very not normal, right? I think that's what owners have to get down to is this a temporary set of circumstances, or is this something that's permanent and we really need to look at making changes? That's the ultimate deciding factor that we have to make. So when I'm faced with that kind of a situation, again, I just start looking at factors, looking at our circumstances. What changed? Is there something we need to pivot and make a permanent difference? Those are the things to have in mind for, another one is, did we have one of our bigger clients leave us, right? If you're doing recurring work or recurring litigation for somebody, did they move elsewhere, or maybe their workload reduced, and so maybe our bill to them reduced. Again, just looking at our circumstances and then make the determination, is this just a result of our current circumstances, or is this a permanent thing? That's what you have to dive in and figure out and decide.
Ryan, thanks for the guidance today. These are some great tips. And thank you for listening to the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler. If you're ready to get financial clarity for your law firm, visit netprofitcfo.com to learn more about working with Ryan and his team. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, share it with another law firm owner, and leave a review, because the more you know, the more you grow. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.